"Get out of my park, vagrant Nor! This dog," Officer Klein snarled, yanking the leash of the powerful German shepherd, "will make you wish you had." The old man, Arthur, merely blinked, his weathered face impassive beneath the brim of a tattered cap. He sat on the park bench, a picture of weary stillness against the indifferent city. The officer's voice dripped with contempt, a sound too familiar to Arthur. "If you believe in honoring those who've served, comment respect." Arthur Thompson was a ghost in his own city, his days measured by the sun's slow arc and the knowing ache of hunger. Once, his hands had commanded respect, his voice, obedience. Now, they clutched a worn rucksack, his only possession. He was unassuming, invisible to most, just another forgotten soul. The park bench was his brief refuge, a place to watch the world without being part of it. Officer Klein, young and bristling with authority, advanced. His polished boots crunched on the gravel path, a stark contrast to Arthur's worn sneakers. Said, "Move it. This isn't a flop house." Klein's eyes, cold and judgmental, scanned Arthur from head to toe. Lingering on his threadbare coat and the grime that spoke of street living, he saw not a man but a problem to be cleared. "People want to enjoy their lunch here, not look at this." He gestured dismissively at Arthur. Arthur's quiet presence seemed to offend Klein's sense of order. His uniform was a shield for his disdain. The officer represented a system that had long since discarded men like Arthur, valuing appearances over unseen histories. He tapped his baton impatiently against his thigh. Arthur finally spoke, his voice raspy from disuse, yet steady. "I'm not bothering anyone, officer, just resting." He made no move to rise, his gaze fixed on some distant point. Klein's face tightened. "Resting. You're loitering, trespassing, practically, and you're resisting an officer by not complying." The accusation hung in the air. A few park-goers paused, their curiosity piqued by the escalating confrontation. Whispers rippled through the onlookers. Arthur endured the tirade silently, his shoulders slightly stooped, but his spine held a core of unyielding steel. He had faced far worse than an arrogant young policeman. This was just another indignity. In a long line of them, he closed his eyes briefly, a flicker of pain crossing his features before it was quickly masked. "That's it. I'm warning you, old man. Get up and leave, or I'll arrest you for vagrancy and resisting." Klein's voice rose, drawing more attention. Arthur's hand instinctively tightened on his rucksack. It held the remnants of his past, the fragile pieces of a life he rarely acknowledged. Klein noticed the movement. "What's in the bag, huh? Stolen goods?" He reached for it. Arthur flinched, pulling the rucksack closer. "Don't touch that." His voice, though quiet, had a sudden edge of command that momentarily surprised Klein. Recovering, Klein sneered. "Resisting now, are we, Shadow?" he barked at the canine. "Looks like we have someone who needs a little persuasion. You're going to regret this." Officer Klein unclipped Shadow's leash, his eyes glinting with cruel satisfaction. The dog, a magnificent animal, tensed, its intelligent eyes fixed on Arthur. "Attack," Klein commanded, pointing toward the old man, some shielding their children's eyes. The moment stretched, filled with terrible anticipation. Shadow, trained for aggression, trained to obey, gathered himself. He took a step, then another, toward the seated veteran. Arthur didn't flinch. He simply watched the approaching dog. His expression unreadable, Klein grinned, expecting the swift, decisive action of his canine partner. This would teach the old vagrant a lesson he wouldn't soon forget. The park fell into a deathly silence, broken only by the dog's soft panting. But Shadow didn't attack. As he reached Arthur, the dog faltered. He let out a low, confused whine. He sniffed at Arthur's outstretched, unthreatening hand, then nudged it gently with his wet nose. Arthur's fingers twitched, almost involuntarily, stroking the dog's head. Then, too, Klein's utter astonishment and the crowd's bewildered. Relief Shadow sat down. He didn't just sit. He positioned himself squarely in front of Arthur, facing Officer Klein, and let out a soft, protective growl rumbled deep in his chest. His ears were alert, his body language clearly shielding the old man. "Shadow, what are you doing? Attack!" Klein yelled, his voice cracking with disbelief and fury. The dog ignored him, pressing closer to Arthur. Just then, a sleek black sedan with official plates glided to a silent stop by the curb. The rear door opened, and a tall, distinguished man in the crisp uniform of a high-ranking military officer emerged. His uniform bore the stars of a general. Officer Klein, mid-shout at his disobedient dog, froze, his jaw slack. The general's gaze swept the scene, the confused officer, the protective dog, the weary old man on the bench, the curious onlookers. His eyes, sharp and discerning, narrowed as they fell upon Arthur. He walked purposefully toward the bench, his polished shoes making no sound on the grass. An aura of undeniable authority preceded him. Silencing the murmurs of the crowd, Klein visibly gulped. Suddenly looking very small, the general stopped a few feet from Arthur, his stern face softening into utter shock, then profound respect. "Arthur, Sergeant Major Thompson, is that truly you?" His voice held disbelief and deep emotion. Arthur slowly looked up, recognition dawning. A faint, sad smile touched his lips. "General Davies," he acknowledged. Officer Klein's face went white. General Davies turned to him, his voice ice. "Officer, do you know who this man is?" He didn't wait. Sergeant Major Arthur Thompson, 30 years of service, Medal of Honor, one of the finest canine handlers this Army ever saw. The techniques he developed are still standard. That dog, he gestured to Shadow, instinctively recognized a master, a friend. He noticed Arthur's rucksack. His medals are probably in there, the ones he was too humbled to display. Officer Klein stood speechless, shame and fear on his face. He stammered an apology, arrogance gone. General Davies cut him short. "A full report on my desk, officer, and learn some respect." He turned to Arthur gently. "Sergeant Major, let's get you out of here." He offered his arm. Arthur rose, dignity restored by the general's presence. Bystanders watched in hushed awesome. Tearful, others ashamed of their indifference. Shadow winked softly, nuzzling Arthur's hand before an aide took him. Klein was later reprimanded and ordered into mandatory sensitivity and de-escalation training with a focus on community respect and veteran awareness. Sergeant Major Arthur Thompson's honor was vindicated that day, his quiet strength finally seen. The arrogant officer learned a harsh lesson, and the city was reminded that heroes often walk among us, unseen and uncelebrated. This story powerfully teaches us not to judge by outward appearances, for true worth, courage, and service often lie hidden beneath a humble exterior. The respect we owe to those who have sacrificed is immeasurable. Imagine Arthur later that week, clean-shaven and in fresh clothes, standing tall beside General Davies at a veteran support center, perhaps even advising on canine training programs again. Shadow, of course, found a permanent, loving place by his side. The value of a life is not in its current circumstance, but in its enduring character. Subscribe to Hidden Sparks. For more stories that uplift and inspire, remember to comment, respect. If Arthur's story touched you, like, share, and subscribe to Hidden Sparks for more powerful tales. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Hidden Sparks to stay inspired.